Video files are most of the times quite big, and to be able to turn them into a GIF, first you should trim the video itself. Especially if you want to loop the animation, you might be able to find a shorter period of time from the video which can already be looped. So what you need to do to be able to trim is to set the end of the work area to the part which you think can be used for a loop. In my case, instead of using 12 minutes, I just reduced the whole work area to 2 minutes. And then I'm going to also trim the video here. So when I'm trimming, I can actually preview where I'm going to trim this film. So that's the work area now. I can zoom a little bit closer. And if I use the loop playback option from the drop down here, I can check how it looks. So if I press space, it will play the animation and it will also loop it. It looks quite good. With this time-lapse video, it's hard to tell where's the trim. So we have this nice rhythm between the green and red light and the cars moving. So I think it will work perfectly. So we already saved a lot for the file size by just simply trimming the video. The next step to further reduce the size, we can go to the image menu and change the image size here. That is an option, of course, we can change later from the Save for Web dialog box. But to save time, when you get to that stage, it's better to do it in the beginning. So I prefer to use the image size dialog box. And here, instead of having this full HD size, I'm going to drop this down to probably around 450. So let's have a look at that size. I think that will still work fine for the web. And here I can also choose what kind of resampling option I would like to use. In this case, I think bicubic sharper is the best, because that's the best option for reduction. So if I click on OK, that will reduce the size of the video, but it will have to convert the video layer into a smart object first. So if I click on convert, then as you can see now, this is my actual video size. So if I play the video, we can see once it renders it, how it looks with this size. So with that, already we are one step closer to how the final video will look like. And the next step will be to convert the video into a frame animation. So now that we resized the image size and we also trimmed the video, we can go to the File Save for Web option. When you first come into this dialog box, you will have the JPEG preset and the JPEG high possibly. And you can tell that with this file format, the end result will be 55 kilobytes. But if I change the preset to GIF, and I'm going to use 64 dithered to start with, which is a preset, but then we will be able to change all the options to improve the quality. We can see now with this preset, the file size is 2.4 megabytes. So much larger than the JPEG, but this file format can include the animation. So I don't really have to do anything in the timeline panel. I don't have to turn my animation into frame animation. The Save for Web dialog box will do the job for me. So here you can see we have animation, looping options. We can change that from once to forever, or we can also choose other options. So we can specify how many times we want this to loop. And we can also see the number of frames created. If I click on play, I can have a preview here as well, but this is not the best preview. I will show you what I prefer to use for previewing. So we already see the image size as well here. And remember, I told you it's better to do that outside of the Save for Web dialog box, because then it will just render much quicker once you start making changes here in this dialog box. At this stage, if you want to reduce the file size radically, you can also delete some of the frames from the animation. So if you save out your GIF file and bring it back into Photoshop, you will get the timeline panel with frames. because now it's a frame animation. So we can actually see that we have 51 frames here. And I can reduce the amount of frames by selecting, let's say, every third frame. So I select 3, then hold down Command or Control, and I select every third of them. If you really want to reduce file size, you can even select every second frame, and even your animation will still look quite good. Of course, with this one, we are losing parts of the animation, so we are making it shorter. And we will have to compensate for that as well. So we just need to keep in mind that by deleting frames, we are actually making the whole animation shorter. So I selected these frames and I can click here on the panel menu and choose delete frames. So that will delete them. I just click on OK. Now we should have less frames, so 34. And if I click on the panel menu again, I can choose select all frames. And then here at the bottom on one of these little drop downs, we can choose other. And here we can change the frame delay or frame duration for all of these. And I'm going to change it to 6. So I make them a little bit longer to compensate for that loss in the length of the animation. So if I click on OK, now it looks like that, and I can click on play and see that it's still good. So it doesn't really feel like there's frame skipping, but we reduce the file size significantly. If we go to File Save for Web again and choose GIF, we can check that now it's actually around 1 megabyte. But there are other ways to reduce the file size. As I said, this is a bit radical way of doing it. There are more subtle ways as well here in the Save for Web dialog box, which I'm going to explain to you in more detail. Next step is to set the colors used for this GIF file. We have some standard numbers here. These numbers are based on the bit depth. So we have 1 bit, 2 bit, 3 bit, and so on and so forth. Each time 2 on the power of 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 8. So that's 8 bit, and that's the max that you can save into a GIF file format. That's 256 colors. Of course, the higher amount of colors you include, the higher your file size will be. But at the same time, the better the quality will get as well. So let's have a look at the 1-bit image. That's not much. That's only 2 colors, and in this case we have transparency, so that's already 1 color. Let's just get rid of that, and once we have 2 colors, that means we will have an interesting monochromatic image created. And we can have a look at this. If I click on play, see how that will look in a GIF file. Now this is 460K. So even with 2 colors, we have quite a large file size compared to the JPEG image, which was a static image. If I switch to 4 colors, we will still have a monochromatic feel to the image, but this gets already bigger in file size. Let's go up to 8, which is 3-bit. Now we start to see more colors. And the further up I go, the more colors will be included into the color table. So here I can actually see these little swatches, all the colors used for my animation. So if I go all the way up to the max color amount, 256, then I will have a much more similar image to the original video. In this case, my color table is full with colors, but my file size is also quite high. So now it's 4.5 megabytes. That's too big for a GIF file. So I definitely need to reduce that. Let's just see if I go down to 128. It went down a bit, but it's still quite high. So let's just go down to 64. And I think that's still quite good, but we might need to change the color reduction algorithm. Once you choose how many colors you want to include in your GIF file, you can also change the quality and how it looks by changing the color reduction algorithm. First of all, there is perceptual. Now this one creates a custom color table by giving priority to colors for which the human eye has greater sensitivity. Then there's selective, which is the default option. And this will also create a color table, which will be similar to the perceptual color table, but in this case favoring broad areas of color and the preservation of web colors. So this color table usually produces images with the greatest color integrity. If we set this to adaptive, I think in this case that is the best, because we will have these very nice red lights. So let's have a look at before selective. It didn't really include that red light. And if we switch back again to adaptive, as you can see, we have a little bit of more variation, because it will create a custom color table by sampling colors from the spectrum appearing most commonly in the image. So in this case, this is probably the best. But then there's also restrictive, which is going to use a standard 216 color web-safe color table, which will ensure that no browser dither is applied to colors when the image is displayed. If the image has fewer than 216 colors, then the unused colors are removed from the table automatically, which happened in our case as well. It's only 181 colors. So this file is below 3 megabytes now, if I use restrictive. Let's have a look at the default selective option. That's 2839, and perceptual will be the same. And if I choose adaptive, that's actually the highest. So that's the best quality from all of the algorithms, but it's also the highest file size. But there's actually not much difference between these 4 options. So I'm going to stick with the adaptive algorithm. The next option is dithering. So we can specify the dither algorithm. We can either use no dither or one of these 3, diffusion, pattern, or noise. Once again, it's best to check which one will give us the lowest file size and at the same time good quality. So if I choose no dither, that will reduce the file size definitely, and the image still looks okay. But if I choose diffusion, it will increase the size again. Pattern will be also roughly the same size. It's actually even higher than diffusion, but also the quality got a little bit better. And then if I choose noise, that will give us even higher file size. So probably if we use dithering, I would stick to diffusion. And then here on the right side, we can specify the amount of dither. The more dithering in an image, the larger the file size, obviously. So dithering adds these different colored pixels in close proximity to each other to simulate secondary colors or smooth gradations between the colors. With some videos, you will definitely need dithering to make it look good, but it's best to use the least amount of it if it's possible to be able to keep the smallest file size. So you can drag dithering down further. I only have like 22%, and that still looks good. So I will probably stick with this option. Maybe I set it to 20%. Once we set up the 4 most important options, the color reduction algorithm, the number of colors, the dithering and the amount of dithering, then we also have some more options here: transparency, interlaced, web snap, and lossy. Let's have a look at these now. So if I include transparency, surprisingly, it will reduce the file size. And it's quite a lot. It's almost half a megabyte. So by just adding that transparency option, I actually managed to save quite a lot from the file size. And the reason why transparency can reduce the size is because it's replacing one of the colors in the color table. So you can see here the 64th swatch is actually the transparency. So if I turn it off again, you can see it will be replaced with a color, and that increases again the size. Once I turn it on, then the 64th color again is transparency, which means our file size can be reduced thanks to that. So it's definitely useful to include, even if you don't have transparency. But surprisingly, if you just delete the swatch, won't give you as much reduction on the file size as including transparency. If you use Interlaced, that will make the GIF download in multiple passes, so they will work like progressive JPEGs. The only problem with that is it will increase the file size slightly. As you can see, it added around 100 kilobyte. So I'm not going to add the interlaced option, but what I'm going to add is the web snap, and this will again reduce the number of colors used for my GIF file, and it will try to use only the standard web colors close to the original colors that we had here in the color table. So when you see a little star over a swatch, that means that's a standard color for web. Obviously, the higher you set the web snap, the more you will be able to reduce the file size, but with that the quality will also degrade. So let me just set web snap probably around 40%. So that reduces the file size a bit, but I will still have quite a good quality. So it will only change 3 of my colors to web colors because they were the closest. So as you can see, it works like a tolerance. The higher this percentage, the more colors will be switched to web colors. And if I go further up, then after a while, it will start removing colors as well. So like here around 88%, I start losing colors from my original palette. Maybe if I keep it somewhere around 80, that will result in 60 colors. So we removed 4 colors, but the image still looks good. So I probably will keep WebSnap around this. And Lossy will add a compression to each of the frames. And as you can see, that can result again in a much smaller file size. But unfortunately, we lose a lot from the quality. So let me reduce the Lossy option, and I will probably keep it somewhere around 30. Again, it's just try to find the balance between quality and size. So I have Lossy set to 30, WebSnap set to 80%, Interlaced turned off, and transparency on. Once you get to this stage, you can start comparing the original and optimized version. So you can check original and optimized, switch between the two, and also you can choose 2 up, for example, to see them side by side. So you can check each of the details and compare the differences. Here you can also choose different options just to see them side by side. So instead of using original, here for the top part you can also have maybe the default GIF 64 dithered option. So you can compare that our settings and the original, they look quite similar. Actually, we have better colors here at the bottom, but still we reduce the file size quite a lot. And in case I want to even reduce the size more, I can just simply delete colors. So if there's a color which I think is not that relevant, maybe if there's 2 very similar colors like these brown colors, I can just simply select one and delete it. That's probably more in the image. And that again will reduce the size, of course. Once again, maybe we can choose another color which these 2 are very similar, just select one and delete it. The more colors I remove from the color table, the smaller my file size will be at the end. If I like this setup, I can also save this as a preset. So if I click on the Optimize menu, I can choose Save Settings, and I can call this Custom GIF Settings. And I'm going to click on Save. So next time, if I want to, I can just quickly come to this instead of going through all these changes. And instead of clicking on the play button here, I usually click on Preview, which will open a preview in my browser. And I can also see a list of all the settings I used for this file. So there's only one more thing to do, is to save this as a GIF file. I'm going to choose Save and save it on my desktop. So let's just call this New York GIF, and I'm going to click on Save. So with that, my video is converted into a GIF file, and I can use this on the internet. But if I go back to the File Save for Web option, there's one more thing I wanted to show you. Again, under the additional options here, we have the Optimize to File Size, where you can actually set the desired file size and tell Photoshop that that's your limit. So try to match that with the best quality possible. If I click on this, now it's set to 100 kilobyte. It's very low. So if I click on that, obviously we will have much less colors and the quality will be much worse. But even that is higher than 100 kilobytes. But if I go back and again choose optimize file size and I type in 1000 kilobytes, which is 1 megabyte, then again Photoshop will try to match that with the best quality possible. And that's all I wanted to show you about optimizing GIF files. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I hope you will join me next time as well here on Tuts Plus. See you soon.